Good morning, everybody. The topic of my article is the concept of a barbarian in ancient Egypt. So my article consists of 3 parts. So now I'm going to make a short summary of the 3 parts. First part is God-sanctioned Egypt century. According to the Heliopolitan cosmology, the first mount that arose out of the primeval water was the place where the temple of Heliopolis was built, the abode of the life-giving sun god. The Egyptians understood the creation of the world as an act of differentiation and division. Dichotomy and duality was the most important principle of the world. The Egyptians had an anthropomorphic conception of the cosmos and regarded their country the center of the universe. The Nile Valley and the Nile Delta were considered a divine realm which should be protected against the nomadic and the primitive peoples around. On the political map of the world, Egypt was not a country beside many other countries, but the only country surrounded by dangerous areas of chaos. On the lid of a sarcophagus, a map of the cosmos was illustrated. The realm of the gods was located in the innermost sphere. It was surrounded by the Egyptian nomes, and then by the regions of the foreigners. Egypt represented Ma'at, means truth, order, and righteousness, while the areas occupied by the foreigners stood for Isfet, means falsehood, chaos, or evils. So this is just the Egyptian concept of cosmos. And so the Egyptians are in the second circle. The foreigners were in the third circle. On the stele of Amenhotep III from his memorial temple, the god Amon named 4 groups of people who resided on each cardinal direction: Nubian to the south, Asiatics to the north, Libyans to the west, and Pontians to the east. Since Punt was too far away, Nubians, Asiatics, and Libyans became representatives of dangerous outsiders of Egypt. So these 3 groups. The Egyptians' dominion of these peoples was interpreted as the divine will of the gods. So now this is a hymn to the god of Amon. The god speaks to the king, "I give to you valor and strength against all foreign countries. I made your authority and fear of you in every land, the dread of you as far as the 4 supports of heaven." The neighbors of the Egyptians were also called 9 bowls. The word for 9 bowls was written literally with a bow followed by or placed over 9 vertical signs standing for 9. The bow was apparently considered a quintessential foreign weapon. The 9 bows could also be depicted graphically as being trampled by the king or depicted on the footstool of the king. In the royal rhetoric, foreigners were humiliated and described as having bad characters. The vocabulary of humiliation concentrated on the degradation of foreigners for the purpose of magnifying the power of the Egyptian king, who was depicted as righteously defeating chaos and maintaining justice. The most common adjective that modified the names of foreigners was sheshi, which was usually translated vile or wretched. Since foreigners were regarded an inevitable element of the world, they could and should not be annihilated once for all. It was necessary for the Egyptian king to use every thinkable method, including armed forces, magic, and ritual, to protect his country against the chaotic forces. In the Egyptian world view, the boundaries between Egypt and the foreign countries were not established by man, but by the gods. These boundaries represented the demarcation between order and chaos. An invasion of the foreigners meant the destruction of the established order. In the opinion of the Egyptians, the danger and evil of the foreigners legitimized the political violence of the king. The idea of foreigners as chaotic other must be subjugated for the protection of Egypt was most evident in the ubiquitous scene of the smiting of the enemies. The king grabs the enemy or enemies by the hair, lifts his mace head to smite him or them. This action was often described as the arm of his majesty is lifted to ward off evil. So these two pictures. Social dissolution and disorder inside Egypt was frequently associated with foreign invasion or even foreigners emigrating into Egypt. The expulsion of the foreigners was often associated with the reunification of Egypt. This idea was best shown in the prophecies of Nefertiti. Asiatics will fall to his slaughter. Libyans will fall to his flame. Rebels are destined for his rage, and the hostile for his awe. The Uraeus, this is Uraeus, divine snake, at his forehead pacifies the hostile for him. The walls of the ruler are built. Asiatics will not be allowed into Egypt. Ma'at, this again spelling mistake. Yeah. Ma'at will return to its seed. Isfet is driven out. So this is a short summary of the first part. Second part, Egyptian identity based on geographical and religious background. For the ancient Egyptians, there was only one river, and therefore it was only right for the river to flow from the south to the north. So this is two hieroglyphic sign. The first is going south. That means against the flow of the river. So we can see the determinative with the sail. But this is going downstream, going to the north, because it's going along the river. So there's no sail, or this is geographically determined. In the New Kingdom, the Egyptian soldiers who first saw the Euphrates flowing from the north to the south called it the inverted river. The agricultural cycle of Western Asia as well was viewed as inverted to what was normal in Egypt. In the royal hymn of the Ramesside period, the author said that the Asiatics were those who plow in summer and reap in winter, exactly the opposite of what the Egyptians do. The Egyptians lived primarily in the arable land along both sides of the Nile and the Delta, which were inundated once a year. They called their country Kemet, meaning black land or fertile land. The hieroglyphic for Egypt was written with the determinative for town. This indicated that the Egyptians considered their part of the world as cultivated and ordered, and regarded themselves as civilized. The names of the foreign countries were followed by the determinative for hill, mountain, no matter they were flat or hilly. So this is Kemet. So we see the last determinative for town or city. This is for the name Egypt. But for all other foreign countries, the determinative is this for desert or mountain. So some names, Egyptian neighbors, they were bound, and their name is all determined by the sign for desert or mountain. So no exceptions. The Nile and the fertile land made it possible for the Egyptians to enjoy settled life from a very early date. Because of resident lifestyle, the Egyptians in a village, in a town, or in a city all had their own gods, the so-called local gods, and they developed the idea of afterlife, which was closely related to their local gods. Membership in ancient Egypt was not simply a matter of fact, but the product of a cultural effort of the society. Egypt was a tight society, both in the environmental and cultural aspects. So we may take the story of Sinua as a very good example in explaining how the ancient Egyptian identity was built. Sinua was a court official before he fled from Egypt to Regeno in West Asia. And then he was there, married and had many children and became a rich man. But when he got old, he began to worry about his afterlife. So he wrote a letter to the king to ask for permission to return to Egypt. The king explained what the ceremony or the tomb or this burial would look like. And he, at the end, the king explained why Sinua should not die in a foreign land. You shall not die abroad. You not shall Asiatics inter you. You shall not be wrapped in the skin of a ram to sow as your coffin. Too long a roaming of the earth. Think of your corpse, come back. The lifestyle of the foreigners was an inverted form of the civilized existence in every respect. And then Sinua described his transformation from a nomadic, that means barbaric, to a resident, that means civilized person. Years were removed from my body. I was saved, my hair was combed. Thus was my scholar returned to the foreign land, my dress to the sand pharaohs. I was clothed in fine linen. I was anointed with fine oil. I slept on a bed. I had returned the sand to those who dwell in it, the tree oil to those who graze themselves with it. So this explains how the Egyptians regarded themselves civilized people. So 我应该到几点？我到几点应该是？ So I'm really in a hurry. So I would keep here. So we find the most remarkable association of the environment with the characters of its inhabitants in the instruction of for Marie Curie. So here, citation, the miserable Asiatic, he is wretched because of the place he is in. Short of water, bare of wood, its paths are many and painful because of mountains. He never stays in one place. Hunger always pushes his feet. He fights since the time of Horus, never able to win, yet never defeated. He never announces the day of combat, like a thief who is afraid of arm of troops. So this is the second part, the last part. So I'm talking about the assimilation and a cultural reason of foreigners in ancient Egypt. So as early as in the ruin of Sneferu of the 4th dynasty, Nubians and Libyans were resettled to the newly colonized Nile Delta. Asiatics were recruited in the royal seafaring ships of the Fourth Dynasty on the basis of facial features and anthropological material. Scholars even put forward the argument that Libyan and Nubian women were introduced into Egyptian royal harem. Tomb painting or reliefs at Giza show that Nubians were employed in private households of the officials of the Fifth Dynasty. In the Sixth Dynasty, Nubians were recruited for the Egyptian army as auxiliary troops. So this is just also the opposite of the royal propaganda or royal rhetoric. So now, I'm taking some more examples. So now I'm going to the last part. I would like to make some concluding remarks. First, so we should pay attention to the different genre, or German word Gattungen, and the so-called Kitsch, again German word, Kitsch im Leben of the genre. But at the same time, we must be aware of the fact that the royal rhetoric could sometimes have truth, while the content of the certain private inscriptions might have been invented. The second point is every culture is capable of establishing its own identity and at the same time developing techniques of assimilating foreigners. The third point is the process of this assimilation in ancient Egypt was complicated and different from time to time and from case to case. So in my opinion, what we should avoid is to generalize. Yeah. So thank you for your attention.